Hello there, people of the internet. I am out here with my M1 Grand, Garand, however it is you want to pronounce that, and immediately I know exactly what you guys want to hear. That is just the most magical sound, isn't it? If you like that sound, then you are among the right people. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I am out here because I want to go ahead and talk about something that I get regular comments for. Garand Thumb. What that is, what Garand Thumb actually is, and no, I'm not talking about the YouTuber, is whenever the Garand bolt goes forward and you catch your thumb inside the Garand bolt just like that. Ow, I can't imagine doing that for real. That would really suck. I can't like the YouTubers that do that to themselves just for the sake of having a viral video. That is terrible. But the idea behind Garand Thumb is as you load your end block clip into the Garand bolt then detaches itself from its holding mechanism and flies forward, and you have the potential of catching your thumb inside of that Garand bolt. Now, I don't necessarily have all that much issue with that because typically whenever I break this thing out, ammunition is quite expensive and I'll only send a couple of rounds downrange from my M1 Garand. This right here is a rifle that is chambered in .30-06. It was adopted by the United States in the mid-1930s. I think the date was 1936, but I could be wrong about that. It's actually from a Canadian designer, and it was specifically designed for these in-block clips. Oh, right, I stuck it into the rifle. Specifically designed for these in-block clips at request of Army Ordnance. There's a couple of real benefits to having in-block clip integrated systems. One of the big ones being that you can carry around a lot more ammunition because you don't have heavyweight magazines. I'm sure a lot of people are going to go into the comments and they're going to tell me that magazines were expensive and hard to make for the time period, which is why most countries went with stripper clips or in-block clips or things of that nature. Tell that to the people who were running the Thompsons and 1911s and BARs and etc., things that took external magazines. The idea behind having the in-block clip was more or less so you could carry more ammunition on person with less weights. Magazines back during this time period were typically made of metal, and typically that metal was going to be steel, and steel is going to be quite heavy. This rifle was originally intended to fire a .277 caliber projectile, I do believe, and it was originally intended to hold 10 rounds of ammunition. However, the United States had such a surplus of .30-06 ammunition that they ended up chambering the rifle for .30-06 instead of its original intended caliber, and since .30-06 is simply a fatter, larger bullet, the magazine capacity was diminished down to 8 because bigger bullets means less ammunition in that space. Now, along with the .277 caliber diameter projectiles, it was actually supposed to be a primer actuated gas system or primer actuated recoil system. And what that means is with every shot fired, the primer was supposed to back out of the cartridge case itself. And that backing out of the cartridge case, with lack of display purposes here, that backing out of the cartridge case essentially unlocked the bolt mechanism to be able to open and cycle the action. That was incredibly complicated to make, especially because the ammunition, you needed to be exactly precise to allow that movement of that primer out of that cartridge case, and it is just not something that is feasible, especially for that time period, to do on a mass production scale. So they went with just a standard piston operated system, which is what the M1 Garand has. There are a few ways to avoid getting Garand Thumb. A lot of people, hold on, let's go ahead and listen to that ping once more as I open this up. A lot of people will tell me that once you put your in-block clip, if you hold that clip down with your thumb, then there is a mechanism inside the Garand that will prevent the bolt from flying forward and smacking into your thumb until you let go of the thing. I'm not sure the validity of that. I have tested it myself, and neither of my Garands, this is a 1944 production and I have a 1952 production, neither of my Garands have that feature. Ask me how I know. But neither of those Garands have that feature. The bolt is strictly held back from friction from the in-block clip holding the bolt back because the Bolt is trying to go forward, and the round inside of the clip is simply holding it back. So it's held back on the round itself and not some sort of safety feature, which is why you have to bump it forward. Now, if you have a clip that is particularly old and worn out, then you won't have that friction because the clip is old and worn out and there's nothing holding that round inside of the clip, not a real significant amount of friction anyway. And so as a result, that bolt, the spring pressure from that bolt is able to push past that, and that's whenever you have issues with Garand Thumb. One of the best ways to get around getting Garand Thumb is while you load your system, you take the palm of your hand, rest it on your charging handle, and you use the palm of your hand to hold that charging handle back as you load your system. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen that plenty of times, but that's how you do it, and I still get questions about that to this day. These rifles were originally intended to fire, actually, they were originally intended to fire various different kinds of ammunition. But ultimately, in the end, they ended up firing M2 ball rounds, and what this is this is a 150 grain projectile, and it's going to be traveling at approximately 2,800 or so feet per second. There is some speculation as to whether or not you can safely fire commercial ammunition out of these. Commercial 30-06 tends to run those 150 grain projectiles at faster velocities, typically more around 3,000 or so feet per second. There are slow motion footage captures of the M1 Garand system being ran harder as a result of these higher 30-06 pressures, and that makes sense simply because this is a gas operated system. Higher pressures means the rifle is ran harder. Now, whether or not that harder running of your rifle is going to actually damage the rifle, that right there is something that is very open to interpretation and speculation. A lot of people tell me they run commercial ammo through their M1 Grands just fine, and a lot of people tell me that they can't do it because they will bend their operating rods. In my experience, I actually have bent an M1 Garand operating rod running 150 grain projectiles, commercial ammo, at that 3,000 foot per second mark. So in my experience with what I would say, yeah, you absolutely can. All of that being said, if you have proper springs, a lot of these rifles are incredibly old and sometimes you just have to replace the springs. If you have proper springs, proper lubrication, and you don't give it a full diet of this commercial ammunition, you should be fine. Speaking of ammunition, I have one single round of ball. Let's go ahead and send this downrange. This right here is M2 spec ammunition because I do not have the updated gas plug inside of this M1 Garand. This right here is still set up for its original World War II configuration, complete with the locking rear sights. So I'm going to go ahead and just send this round downrange. This is my only round of M2 ball, and I'm going to use it on this video. And there is our clip flying out of the rifle. So I think I've pretty much covered this rifle and the Garand Thumb, how to prevent it, what it is, why it exists, why we chose to use these end-block clips as opposed to external magazines. Originally, M1 Garand in its infancy designs actually did have an external magazine, and Army Ordnance Departments decided to request that these be used with in-block clips just for the benefits that we had previously discussed. So all of that being said, thank you ever so much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I do appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below has a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. I will see you guys on the next episode, and hopefully, now that you know how to prevent getting Garand Thumb, you guys will be able to save your thumbs. That hurt. All I did was like gently rest it on my thumb, and that hurt. I can't imagine that thing absolutely flying forward like that. Like that would be bad. My goodness. All right, bye guys. I'll see you later. Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garand. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.